Hello, my name is Adam Kahn, and I'm the Rational Investor. Hope you guys are having a good day. Today, what I want to talk about a bit is what's the same today versus 2007, 2008, and what's different. Because I'm seeing a ton of videos out there about how it's happening again, so on and so on and so on. And they're comparing mortgages from back then to today. And I think some of the information is inaccurate. So I just want to go over the differences and what's the same because I'm not predicting one way or another. What I'm saying is this gloom and doom that it can't, there's 100% chance of this recession and you know, times change and things change as well. So before I forget, do me a favor if you've made it this far into the first minute, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, make some comments. I'd love to get some feedback. This is going to sound silly because I'm actually getting pretty excited that I see like 20, 25 views now when I used to get one or two. I know that's barely any in some ways in the realm of YouTube, but to be fair, I do this to help get my own thoughts out there. And I'm thrilled to see a couple people watching, and every now and then they chime in. So, what's the same? The same is a lot of money that's been spent. The Fed's raised rates. Prices have gone up a good amount. Things seem overextended. Things like that are all similar to before. But let me talk about some of the differences because that's where there's a disconnect. We have now what are called non-QM loans. It's non-traditional products that get financed based on bank statements, assets. There's one called debt servicing that works from essentially if the property can rent out for more than what your overall payment is, and things of that nature that are a little bit out of the box. People are trying to compare these loans to the ones from the 2008 correction. Where they differ is the main used at that time was a no income, no docs, no job type of loan that looked at your credit score versus what they called stated income. And on top of that, there were four different payment options for that mortgage. You could do an interest only payment, what was called a negative amortized payment, a fully amortized payment, and of course you could pay more as well. So I want to talk about the first two before I go into the rest of it. So interest only is exactly what it is, or what it sounds like. Essentially, you're making the interest payments on a property. So if you pay $300,000 for a home, you put some money down. Let's keep in mind some of these properties you could take a second loan for the down payment on top of it. So you might have put up zero and owe 300,000 on a $300,000 home. In fact, you might even owe more if you've covered closing costs and all of those expenses as well on your purchase. So the interest only is just the interest on the loan. So if you owe 300,000 on that $300,000 purchase, just to make the math easy and everything else, you're consistently just making the interest payment. And when the loan matures or seasons, usually after 5 years, those were the ones they were using back then, you still owe $300,000 on the loan. The second option I mentioned was a negative amortized loan, which is even less than that, and you start to add principal onto what you owe. So after the 5 year period where the loan would mature or season and then adjust into a different type of product, it's the same loan, but the way that it allows for payments changes. Well, now you actually owe more than the $300,000 than you owed originally, or whatever it was that you owed. So you've actually added on to your principal due and not just paid the interest. So if you end up in a position where housing corrects, not only do you owe what the value of the home was, you owe more, and the home might be worth less money. Then, when your payment matures or seasons, you go into what's called a fully amortized payment, which is what most of us know as a traditional mortgage payment. You're paying your interest as well as your principal and some formula that calculates, how much of each. So let's use that $300,000 home example and go back to 2008 where the housing prices, and let's just say they just start to correct and you owe 300,000 still. Let's say you did the interest only. And the house is only worth 270 or 260 as the market begins to turn, and your mortgage payment then matures and now you're paying a full mortgage as before just the interest. Well, the difference could be three, four, 5 times the payment. And if you were comfortable paying $600 a month, which was the interest, and all of a sudden you have to pay 1,500, 1,700, 2,000 a month, and you're looking at a home that you owe more money on than what you originally paid, and your payment is now skyrocketing, that's a big difference from what you look at today. Most people got into good rates and good terms, and the mortgage is fixed. And then we'll get into even if they got in more recently where the rates are higher. If you bought a $300,000 home with a regular mortgage the past few years, and I don't mean recent, well, as I said, I'll get into that in a bit. Well, you don't have this exponential increase of your payment. The only thing that's going to go up are the property taxes and potentially the homeowner's insurance. I know some places like Florida have had some escalations in homeowners insurance, but even that, it's a small percentage of your total mortgage payment. If your homeowner's insurance doubled, well, your payment didn't double, just your homeowner's insurance portion. So, $300,000 home 2 years ago, monthly payment was probably $1,500, $1,600 a month. It's much more now. I get that. But nothing has changed other than your taxes and insurance. Maybe you're at 17 or 1800. So there's nothing that should really put you in a position where you can no longer afford those payments the same way. So if the housing prices drop, now they've gone up in the past few years, so odds are you have a good amount of equity on top of all this explanation. But let's pretend for a minute that didn't happen. $300,000 home. Let's just say it's still 300,000 or thereabout. Reality is it's probably more like 450 based on what the market's done. And interest rates have gone from the 3.5% that you got all the way up to 7 and change. Well, what's the pressure as to why you would sell? I don't even understand where that comes into play. So I just don't get how they compare it because prices have gone up and rates have gone up and oh, it's going to collapse. You're not going to have that huge influx of properties from the homeowners that have the shock of their payment tripling or quadrupling or even more so because their loans matured. Really, they get stuck in their loan and they're not going to want to move because interest rates are significantly higher. Where I do see some volume potentially coming to the market is people who bought as investment properties the past year or two that were counting on rent prices staying where they were and didn't calculate that it was possible that rents got overinflated because of COVID as well. And as the rents come down and normalize a bit, if you bought in the past year or two and you have a high interest rate, compared to what it was before, maybe you're at 7 and a half type of interest, and you've done a bunch of math based on getting the proper rent return, and you thought the rents would be higher than what they really are. Sure, you may end up upside down where you're not making enough on the rental to cover the mortgage. Now, if that's the case, I'm really sorry, but you either put 20 or 25% down, so you have a decent amount of equity in the home, and there'll be a decision to make as to whether I decide to sell the property or keep the property. I do think we could get some inventory from that, but it's not going to be anything close to what came to the market in 2008. And you also have to factor in the new home builders. When I moved out to Las Vegas back in 2005, watching the boom and the way that the new home builders were being, they were just building as many houses as they could, as fast as they could to meet the demand. You go fast forward to today or the last couple of years, they don't build the house until they have down payment and then some sort of commitment, well, earnest money, not down payment, some sort of commitment from a buyer. They're not overbuilding the same way, which goes in tune with a little of why we have a lack of inventory. To be perfectly honest, if the Fed has played this really well As some of those investors decide, I'd rather just get out of this property, and we get some more inventory to the market, and the market slows down a bit, they might play out pretty well, where you'll see a nice balance. However, to think that we're going to have a 2008 correction and compare the non-QM loans to the loans of the past is just inaccurate information. I hate to tell those people that just see this awful disaster coming, that the only way I really see that coming is if the unemployment spikes up, and I mean spikes up dramatically. If it spikes up 1% or whatever it is the Fed's hoping to do to slow things down more, my guess is the they'll have to pivot, they'll catch the rates, but I don't see any crazy dramatic downfall to the economy. And if we're really lucky and there's a soft landing, or the market just keeps continuing, and I don't mean higher and higher and higher, but meaning it normalizes a bit, I think you might be surprised that maybe we don't see the price correction people are expecting. And if we do see a price correction, which, to be fair, we're already down from a year ago, somewhere between 5 and 12%, depending on the neighborhood and everything else. To me, this is a more normal market. And if it gets to where it starts to revert, I think you'll start to see buyers come in. If the rates come down and the prices come down a bit, I don't see the panic ensuing because everybody's got these terrible mortgages that are now tripling and quadrupling in payment, and I just want out. I do see some investors that might be upside down and did some bad math based on bad rents they were assuming, and maybe some of the Airbnbs too. But I don't think that's as big of a portion of the total real estate market as everybody that was buying their primary residence in the past. Most of the clients that we have to qualify at this point, they're putting down a nice big down payment. Their credit scores are super strong. They have solid employment. It's just not the same as stated income and everything else like before. Even those non-QM loans, they do an analysis after 12 months or 24 months of bank statements, or you're required to get a letter from your CPA stating that the income's legitimate and they can afford this property. It's not a simple, gee, I make enough money. And let's go back to about 2007, because I got caught up a little bit in it too, and thank God I canceled. But I went to a new home builder and we were looking at properties, and I was thinking of getting in the industry as well. And I remember going through the process and the guy helping me out. And I left Chicago. I was a professional commodities trader out there, but I wasn't working when I first moved out here. I was fortunate enough that I had done real well and didn't need to pick up a job. So we're looking at the houses, and the person who's talking to me, I had filled out the information. How much do you make per year was one of the questions on the application. I don't even remember what I wrote, but something really low. A, because I didn't want him to know my personal information, and B, I didn't understand the process back then. So I think I wrote down 15,000 a year, 20,000 a year. And as he's going through the paperwork, he goes, "Oh, no, 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 you have to change that." And he crosses it out and writes $200,000 in that section. Now, that's how they determined income, was from a client essentially telling them what it was. And then the guy on the other side of the table, if it wasn't what it was supposed to be, literally crossed it out for me and wrote in a different number. If you went along with that and thought that was okay, I'm not really sure how the borrowers got taken advantage of, or if they were lying just because they wanted to buy whatever they wanted to buy. On the drive home from that purchase, I said to my wife, this doesn't feel right. And I ended up calling the builder and I said, "Look, I put $3,000 down. If you need to keep it, you need to keep it, but I'm not buying this home. Something doesn't feel right." Now, I can look back and pat myself on the shoulder and say, "Great move." But the reality is that guy just changing the paperwork and saying, "No, no, no, you have to say you make $200,000 a year," was super uncomfortable for me. That is not how people qualify for loans today. I don't care which program it is they're using. I'm happy to talk people through the bank statement ones, the asset depletion ones, the debt servicing ones, or any other wacky one you've heard. One of my friends who's a realtor went on and on about how in California, all you need to do is put 40% down and they'll just give you a loan. That's not accurate. It might have been shared that that is, but there's an ability to repay law that people have to show some ability to repay these loans. They're not just full take advantage of the client type of stuff. So hopefully you found that interesting. Hopefully some of you stuck around for this. Feel free again. Don't forget to subscribe, like, give a thumbs up, make a comment. Tell me why I'm wrong. Again, I'm happy to talk about any of the loan products out there. I like what I do. I find finance really interesting. I was a commodities trader for a long time. I still trade equities. I still watch the currencies. I love markets. Real estate's one of my favorites, so I watch it too. I just don't want to see people get talked out of buying your primary residence. You shouldn't even think of that as investment. Think of your primary residence as security for your family. It's really simple. If you're in the right financial position and you can afford the monthly payments comfortably, there's no reason not to buy your primary residence. If you're looking for investment properties, sure, do some analysis on this stuff. But if you're just looking for the home to live in, I mean, make sure you have a good income, keep your credit score good, and talk to somebody about what the monthly payments look like so you know it's in line with what you can afford. Don't overthink it. So, have a great day. Hmm.